right, welcome everybody, and a special welcome to our primary audience, the Tshwane University of Technology, or TUT. And this is the first edition of our Changing Hearts and Minds, Exploring Environmental Education in Africa series. Okay, so we've all heard this age-old adage that the pen is mightier than the sword, and many people take from it what they interpret from there. I looked at the interpretation of the well-known late Nelson Mandela, our president of South Africa, and he said that education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. Now, our speaker today is Dr. Michele Menegon, and he was born at the foot of the Eastern Alps in northern Italy. It was here that he gained his love for the natural world, and his interest was insects and snakes. This then grew to include everything that lives. His research then expanded to the montane forest of Africa, where he went from forest to forest, absorbing this beautiful and mysterious world. Michele is currently working at the PAMS Foundation. He is a visiting scientist at the Manchester Metropolitan University in the United Kingdom, and he is a part of the African Amphibians and Chameleons Specialist Group of the IUCN. Dr. Michele has also been working as a researcher on forest biodiversity for about 25 years at the Muse, which is the Science Museum of Trento in Italy. And with that, I hand over to you, Michele.
Thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. And I'm actually excited because it's always great to be able, talking to the youth is like to talk to the best, the best option we have in terms of changing what is not actually going the right way. So it's always a big pleasure. I think I will share my screen straight away. I would like to start my this chat with you with a photograph. To me, is one of the most powerful photographs ever taken, and I use it to set the scene. I don't know if some of you know this photograph, but basically it was taken in 1990 by the Voyager 1 space probe while it was going away from our planet. I think it was at about 6 billion kilometers from Earth. And a guy who was part of the program, Carl Sagan, actually asked the guys in the control room to turn the space probe towards us and take a picture. And this is the picture, the one you see. And the tiny, tiny dot you see on the right part of the picture, it's us. So that's home. That's everything we have. And if you look at it, it's just a dot. And it's also what we are messing up. And no one will come to help us to sort out the mess. We have to do it. So this is what we are actually talking about. And sometimes, I go back to these pictures and I look at it because it gives us the right perspective. We are really a tiny, tiny, tiny thing, and we are messing it up. But of course, as usual, there's hope. We have a lot of tools to improve the current situation. Okay, I would like to tell you 3 things very briefly. What's the current situation, which is not nice, unfortunately. Why we are so ineffective in solving current problems. And I think that's very interesting. Because, if we want to solve problems, we have to understand where the problems come from. And sometimes the root cause of a problem is not what we see easily. And also, what's our superpower? Meaning, I mean, we are ruling the world because of specific capacities we have. And I think we are not using those capacity well enough to solve the current issues. So we will go through these three things. And of course, the issue, I mean, the overall issue is extremely complex, and we could talk for weeks about these things. So I'll try to be very quick and but hopefully effective. And in case we can discuss after the talk, and you can ask, and I'll try to answer as much as I can. Okay. In 1872, the first national park was established, was in Yellowstone in the United States. And the reason why people did it was to, as you can read there, to basically to allow people to enjoy the unique hydrothermal and geologic features. After that, many other national parks were established. And at the beginning was just to, to protect and let people enjoy, very nice landscapes, places with a lot of animals. So it was like, protecting places in order to let people enjoy them. Now, things are very different. About 150 years later, we have now thousands of protected areas. And we keep increasing the number of protected areas. And I would say that already quite a big chunk of the Earth's surface is on paper protected. But if we look at the results, there's something that doesn't work well. In fact, today, every year we try to understand how are the trends related to animals, habitat, forest, sea, oceans, environment, fresh waters, and so on. And so we have been kind of collecting information and data about this for decades. And we have somehow quite a good understanding on how things are actually doing. And they're not doing well. In fact, despite from the 1970, we have increased the protected areas by 660%. We have lost about 60% of all the animals, meaning we have lost some species, meaning some species got extinct. But in terms of number of individuals, 60% of the animals that were here 50 years ago, they are not here anymore. But in the same time, protected areas have increased a lot. So there's something that actually doesn't work well. And we can also say that protected areas are very important, but they are not enough. So what can we do? And what is not working? So, of course, there's many, many challenges. And I have to pick some of them just for our discussion and try to navigate some of the issues we face and try to understand how to cope with them. Okay, of course, as I said, many times protected areas are just on paper. And being on paper doesn't mean that something happened out there, in the real world. And this is because of many things: political situation of the country, available funding, management, and so on. So I don't go into these things because I would like to keep our discussion on a higher level, like, try to understand at a larger scale why things don't work. One thing we can discuss is this. Okay, this scheme show how many times conservation work. Basically, there's or let's say works with the small and big conservation organization, like the organization I work for, PAMS Foundation, or WWF, or WCS, or Conservation International, all that stuff. So basically the model is that there's people or institution or countries giving money to these organizations, and they try to do something. And things can go right or not that right. They give a feedback to the entity that gave them money, and usually they ask for more money, and which is fine. I mean, of course, is the way we work. But it's like that a key element hasn't been taken into account enough. For example, there's 1/3 of the world population, like let's say, actually 1/3 of the 9 million rural people that we have on a planet, let's say 300 million people, account for 15% of the world's poor, but basically they control or they own, between 50 and 80% of the high biodiversity land of the planet. And usually these people are not included in the conservation policies and actions. So what happens is that is like a dialogue between the NGOs and the donors, and the local communities are left outside. Also because sometimes it's not easy to work, to include them. You need the right strategies. But let's say that we could find ways for including them and actually making them communicating with you, for example. The question we should ask ourselves is why a person somewhere needs to destroy a forest. Usually they do it because they don't have alternatives. And they are already sitting, in the places where with high biodiversity, a lot of value in terms of nature, and they destroy because they don't have alternatives. So let's provide them alternatives. And now with the current technologies, we can do it quite nicely. It's still early days, but it's possible. But the message I'm trying to convey is that we should rethink the way we engage with the local communities, because they're already in the right place. They do what they do because they don't have alternatives. And by creating the alternatives, they can just do something else. Creating alternatives meaning, if they destroy 1 hectare of forest, we also suffer, a loss, because, the forest work for everyone. If we pay them not to destroy that forest, we all get a gain. So I don't go deeper into this, but basically now it's possible for individuals to cooperate in order to get that hectare of forest preserved. And the people who live there by that hectare of forest can get some value, money, to keep it instead of destroying it. And this probably works better if the entities that cooperate with each other are individuals instead of institutions. And the message for you guys is, at individual level, it's possible to do incredible things, especially now because technology helps to get in touch with each other, to convey, messages, to transfer money, and also to monitor results. So I would say the current paradigm, the way that mostly things work in conservation when run by non-governmental organization, can be changed. So we have seen that is not working well enough, so it can be changed. And a possible solution is individuals engaging with each other more seriously and more effectively. But now we move to a next level. From the 1950s, something that now we define the Great Acceleration has started, meaning that socioeconomic trends and Earth system trends have started growing in a way that the growth often look exponential, meaning that it grows very fast. It grows faster than what we can usually understand. This is a huge problem because basically our model impact on all the elements that make us survive, you know, in a way that we are not able to control anymore. So we have to change the model for sure. We have to understand the trends and we have to understand what is happening. But basically, and we have been knowing this for quite a long time. And we have a lot of science, a lot of information, a lot of, you know, graphs, a lot of discussion about these things. But despite is extremely worrying because it's telling us that we are on a journey that is not going to end well. We are not really doing what we are supposed to do as a global society. So more recently, for example, in 2009, a group of scientists have published a paper in which they have tried to, you know, to identify and split and describe properly the main issues that we have as a global society, defining the so-called safe operating space for humanity, and also providing some of the possible solutions, or let's say some of the routes we should follow in order to implement solutions. But even in this case, and you know, we were already in 2009, we were already, as we are now, in a situation in which everyone sounds worried about what is happening. But for some, you know, kind of mysterious reason, we are not really able to do the right thing. We keep doing, you know, basically what we have been doing for many, many years and decades that have led us to, you know, to this situation. Or we are trying, of course, to change things. But for example, most of the discussion of that the science community and governments and have had after the publication of this paper are mostly academic. They are not really going in, I mean, they are not being transformed into action. I'm not saying that we are doing nothing, but clearly we are not doing enough. In general, what I said at the beginning, you know, the loss of biodiversity, we are losing a lot of animals, both in terms of species and individuals. And, you know, the image you see now, there's a lot of, you know, problems related to the fundamental, you know, dynamics that keep us alive as a society. And of course, and our society is based on of a proper functioning of the environment, is leading to, you know, to something worrying. Okay, to understand this, we have to say that the Earth behaves as a complex system, meaning that from our perspective, it's not easy to understand what is actually happening after, you know, implementing actions, because the consequences usually are non-linear, and all the elements of a complex system interact with each other in a way that usually we struggle to understand, or we are not able to predict. So, but the reason why I put that circle on the left part of the slide, that circle should show that basically our system is made of a lot of, you know, nodes, a lot of relationships of different colors and types and so on, and all these relationships, all this complex interaction between every single element of the planet keep the planet healthy. And if the planet is healthy, we are healthy as a society, as an economy. What we are doing, we are losing diversity, losing complexity, and because of that, we are losing redundancy, which is like a safe net for function that needs to be implemented by the system, and we are losing resilience. Losing resilience means that the system becomes less and less able to cope with big changes. So the message here is that we are living in a system that we don't understand very well. We don't understand the way it works. We understand in general, but basically we cannot predict over the long term which will be the consequence of a specific action. So we have to be cautious. But we are, seems that, and we know all of this. I mean, we have a lot of science telling us this. We have a lot of information, and we also have a quite good understanding of how these systems work, even if we don't understand the big, Earth scale system. So the key question is, why are we so ineffective? Why we are not able, to cope with this? So we have been telling, ourselves how bad the situation is, but still we are not really doing what we are supposed to do, like thinking, how to reverse the trends. And for example, here you see 3 papers. One is the one, on the right, Ecology and Society, published in 2009. So the one I just discussed about the safe operating space for humanity. But the other 2, one is 1975, talking about climate change. And the other one is, I think, was 1982 maybe, or 72, I don't remember, The Limit to Growth. So basically, more than 50 years ago, we were already discussing how the current trend and the current journey is not going to end well, is not going to take us to a place, where things are healthy enough to sustain our society and our economy. So why this? Why in 50 years we haven't been able to, to find better solutions, to divert from the current routes? Okay, one element that we have to take properly into account is our brain. Because our brain is the place where everything happens, where the problems arise and where solutions are found. But our brain is not something that can solve anything, and it works in a specific way. Because, it can certainly produce solutions, but the brain itself can also be one of the main limitations we have, because it does certain things very well, and it does other things not that well, especially if compared to the issues we are going to tackle nowadays. This is because the brain that we have is a product of evolution. It hasn't been created to solve the current problems. It has been evolving in a way to make us surviving in a situation that was actually very, very different from the current one. Let's say, let's move to this. Okay. Many people say that we are, not coping well, for example, with a huge problem like climate change because it's happening too fast. This is not true. It's actually happening too slowly. If we take the perspective of our brain, of course, we see it happening too fast. I mean, when we think to climate change, because we say, okay, by 2050 things will be that bad, and by 2100 things will be even worse, and so on, in terms of increase of temperature, the sea level rise and all that stuff. But for our brain, is happening too slowly. The human brain is not structured to respond easily to large, slow-moving threats. For most of our evolutionary history, we survived because we were able to react immediately to short-term threats. And our brain is wired to react to short-term threats. Okay, so it's basically when things happen and we feel that the things are happening to ourselves here and now, we react. When things are happening slowly and the problems that we are, predicting will, impact us in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, it's like that is not our business. But there are reasons why it's happening, why we work that way. Thanks to decades of collaborations between neuroscientists and psychologists, basically, and also because of we started using a while ago the functional magnetic resonance imaging, through which we can see which part of the brain get activated by something that happened to us. We have learned quite a few things. Okay, in the maze of brain connections that we have, there's an area called medial prefrontal cortex. And basically, it does a lot of things, but also is related to our self-image and all the emotions and behavior related to our self-image. And scientists, they have seen that, for example, when we think to ourselves, this area gets immediately activated and to a very high level of activation. When we think to our relatives, for example, to our family or friends, it gets activated, but a little bit less. When we think to strangers, zero activation, is not active. Meaning that from an emotional point of view and in relation to ourselves, strangers is something that we don't really care about. To care about them, we have to establish some emotional connection. So they have to stop being strangers and they have to become closer to us. A very interesting result was that basically if we talk to ourselves in the future, zero activation, like talking about a stranger, meaning that our future self is something that we don't feel as part of us. So when we think to problems, issues, suffering, that happen to our future self, emotionally, we don't get activated because our brain is wired to react now and here to short-term threats. Of course, rationally, we understand the problem, but the emotional activation that leads us to do something doesn't work. So it's, and that's why basically we don't, of course, we know how bad climate change is going to be, but we struggle to get emotionally, engaged in something that happened over decades and that will produce, of course, we see, some signs of something, going the wrong way, but basically, we don't react properly to something that will happen to ourselves in the future. Same thing when we say, okay, we should do it for our children, for the next generations. Next generations don't activate this, medial prefrontal cortex. So it's the same thing. It's like, we don't engage emotionally with that. We know it rationally, but we don't engage emotionally. So the short-termism is the ruin of sustainability, is the ruin of long-term, strategies to cope with environmental destruction, climate change, and so on. So is the individual mind. Okay, how do we cope with this? We should find, for example, ways through which we set short-term goals that get us engaged emotionally, that give us satisfaction, that lead, to long-term results. And David Attenborough, the famous, British documentarist and communicator, said that it's no longer a scientific challenge. We know very well what is happening. We have all the information, despite the denials. That's a political thing. That's another thing. I mean, we know exactly what is happening. There's no doubt about that. So coping with understanding what climate change is or environmental destruction and how to cope with this is no longer a scientific challenge. We know it. Now is a communication challenge, is something that needs to be tackled from a different perspective. But we can do it. And we have like a superpower that can help us to do it. But we have to kind of probably engage with each other in a slightly different way. Okay. One thing that makes us really, really different from all the other organisms, let's say that regardless of our beliefs, I mean, we are organisms and we work as organisms. So while we are here on this planet, we act like organisms. We have a brain, physiology, and all that stuff that make us working in a certain way, you know, and not in others. And for example, if we think to intelligence, a lot of other animals are intelligent. Of course, we are at the, you know, one of the extreme of intelligence. But you know, not very far from us, there's chimps and bonobo and gorillas, and they're super intelligent, and dogs and dolphins, and they feel emotions, and they are social. They establish complex interaction with each other. So many traits that we have exist also in other animals in a different degree. But there's one thing that we are the only one that have that thing, and it's really like a superpower, and it's the reason why we are ruling the world now. Let me, okay. And basically it's our capacity to cooperate in extremely flexible ways with a lot of people, countless people. What that means that we have our actual superpower is the capacity of creating fictions. So basically believing into something. The way we live is interesting because we don't have direct access to reality. So basically, when we say that thing is green, it's not because out there is green. The green color is in our brain. So because the green out there is just, you know, a specific bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum. So there's no green out there. The green is here. And like the green is here, everything else is here. So basically, we live inside the storytelling where everything is coded in a certain way under a certain, you know, kind of model that we have created, and that's the world where we live. And we got all the way to the point where we are now because through time we have been able, to cooperate also with strangers under the umbrella of big ideas, religions, you know, human rights, democracy, all these things. These things, they don't exist out there. We have created them as ideas, and we are being able to cooperate, you know, across countries, you know, because we saw that as something that we really want as part of our reality. So basically, if we collectively decide to change the scenarios within which we move, our storytelling, we can change behavior quite quickly and dramatically. So Now, and I'm simplifying a lot, we are living, there's like two competing approaches. We can be mostly competitors with each other, or we can be mostly cooperators with each other. And now, in the last especially 30, 40 years, we became mostly competitors, kind of peacefully most of the time, but competing. Competition is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but it shouldn't overcome our capacity to collaborate. And now it's kind of taking too much room, competition. The solution is to be able to, to create a scenario that we can share, a fiction, because our entire life is a fiction. So we have to create a fiction which is slightly different from the current one and cooperate with each other in order to reach it. That's our superpower. And that's what we have been doing for thousands of years. And especially in the last, decades or centuries. So being able to communicate quite rapidly across, big distances because we were able to move more, quicker, or now that we can just chat, phone, email, and so on. So and there's another thing very important. This probably is going to work well, and that's why I put those pictures in the slide. If individuals engage on this, politics is kind of trapped into a situation which is not easy, from which is not easy to get out, but this would be a very long discussion. So individuals should start cooperating in a better way with the aim of creating the new reality where we want to live, the new storytelling, because we have already decided that the storytelling where we are now is not good enough in order to, or is even dangerous, because basically we are leading the entire system to something that I really am, and I'm sure of that, we won't like, because it will make our life or the life who will come after us very, very difficult. After me, actually, your life, very, very difficult. But the key thing is a lot of things can be improved and implemented in a better way at a lower level, like, as I said before, engaging with local communities in a different way, finding new models, new ways, to get them involved, or many other approaches. But what we have to create is a new scenario and cooperate flexibly across the globe to achieve it. And this is possible. This is possible. We did it already many times. The reason why we are now talking about, with all the issues, of course, related, but again, human rights, democracy, and equality, still a long way to go, is because we kept, changing slightly the scenarios, and we have included all these values into it, and we have cooperated in order to make them happen. We can do it even better. But I think is you guys, for a while also myself, I hope, that have to do it. I mean, we have to rely on politics to a certain extent, but this doesn't mean that we don't, that actually this is not enough. We have to take action. And action is cooperation, finding way to cooperate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michele. That is very thought-provoking, extremely thought-provoking talk. Just before we go into the Q&A, because I know Dr. Cheryl Ogilvie has questions, I'm going to there's going to be a poll launched. And then I also have some questions or some statements that I'd like to share with you, Dr. Michele, and then Dr. Cheryl with the class. And then we can go over to the questions from the audience. So I'm just going to, okay, while they're doing that, Dr. Michele,
Yes.
Dr. Cheryl, are you frozen? Dr. Cheryl's frozen. So the target audience today, or the main audience, primary audience, was TUT, and they're a group of second years. And they are, I'd say, maximum maybe 23 years old-ish, average. And just before we started this, Dr. Michele, so we had a discussion about social media. And so, like, I know the current generation that I'm in, I think I only joined social media about 8 years ago. So it's, if to put it into context, this is now for TUT specifically, to put it into context, I joined on Facebook, I went to Instagram, and I stopped there. We didn't go further to TikTok. So when you speak, I can understand, we will, or do you agree or not? This is just a statement, Michele, if the way we're going to interact in the future, because I think the new generation is so set on technology. When you speak about short-termism, the attention span, I think there's studies that showing that the attention span of the coming generations is shortening because of social media. The way of thinking, like you said, because we're not interacting, I think it's going to change the way we interpret things, because I think subliminally, they say that it affects you subliminally, the things that you see on social media. And now with the introduction of ChatGPT, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. If you've come across that as well, is it going to change the way that we're thinking? Is it going to limit us? Are we going to move almost, I want to say, just in very lightly, are we going to devolve if we are now going to depend on AI, artificial intelligence, to start thinking for us? And then that's just one statement that I'd like to just, if there's time, to chat into. And then the second thing, you spoke about connectivity. And so I'd just like to put this forward to TUT specifically, the second year students there. Like Dr. Michele said, the connectivity, maybe find the similarities between you guys, because I know, and I'm in that with Instagram alone. I'm saying Instagram alone because I just want to give a timeline of where I'm at. I'm not at TikTok. I was on Facebook. I'm in Instagram. Do not compete for likes. You guys need to remember that you are now at university. You're going to be taught how to think. So just remember that you have to use this in a positive way. Like Dr. Michele said, with connectivity, find similarities and start sharing information in that way and in that sense. So yeah, Dr. Michele, while they're busy with the poll, maybe we speak about AI, artificial intelligence, and then I'm going to go to Dr. Cheryl Ogilvie.
Yeah,
your thoughts on that?
Not easy. Okay, in general, I think that technology never brings solutions. Technology can help, implementing solution to implement solution more efficiently or rapidly, but technology is not a solution. We have to find a solution, and then we have to use the technology, the available technology to do it as good as possible. Then of course, there's also a big issue. Let's say that the same marketing approaches that actually are making us, not being able anymore to pay attention for more than few seconds, or should be actually used in order to achieve the scenario that hopefully we are able to create ourselves. What I think is there's no reason that we are going to make it. There's no reason. And I'm not going to say that humanity will extinct, but the amount of suffering, it could be, 1,000 times higher than the current one. But in my view, there's no reason that we are going to succeed unless we really want to succeed. So there's part of the solution is ourselves looking into the solution, finding it and implementing it. Artificial intelligence could help. Is there. We are not going to. I hope that rules will come soon in order on how to use it. But I don't know enough to really understand the threats, because it needs to be powered, and at least for a while we are the only one able to power that. I think it could help. It could also be a problem, but again, I would concentrate. I think we spend a lot of time to talk about other things. And we really never talk enough about, okay, what do we do now? And I think is really, really serious, thinking that we are if we want solution for ourselves, solution must come from ourselves. I mean, technology never bring any solution. Technology is a tool in our toolbox, I mean, to implement the solutions. Another thing I would like to say is also distraction. You know, I find quite incredible that, you know, intelligent people, you know, talk about Mars, you know, going to Mars as a solution for humanity, which I find incredibly stupid. So, of course, that's also marketing. I mean, they have their own agenda, and they know that actually, you know, putting very high goals out there where, you know, a lot of people can dream about works from a marketing perspective. But we should retain always our capacity to critical thinking about the information we receive. And this is also a big, something that is not actually going very well. So just to conclude, I would always think technology is part of a toolbox, is never a solution per se. Critical thinking about what we receive, and we should become more able to, you know, to use the tools that we have, like social media, to really implement the life we want, not to be victims of the social media, because basically we are driven by them, not by them. We are driven by the people behind them, because basically we become a product, as you know very well. So, of course, we need changes, but I think the same short-term satisfaction that social media and all the likes and the stuff give us can be actually used smartly to, you know, to drive away from the route where we are and try to achieve what we have to achieve. The mechanism is the same. You know, what we need to change is the goal at the end of the journey.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And I think Dr. Cheryl.
Okay, I've got my students have got some amazing questions for you, Dr. Menegon.
Hi, Doctor. How are you? Sorry.
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
All good. I'm all good. Sorry, I just wanted to ask. Earlier, you said we're worried about our situation, and we're worried about where it's headed. But we all refuse to change, and we kind of refuse to do what's right. Could that possibly be due to our fear of being uncomfortable, and sort of the fact that doing the right thing is going to make us uncomfortable? And if so, like, how would we get people used to the idea of being uncomfortable and sort of doing the right thing despite the discomfort?
That's an interesting question. I think, you know, again, feeling comfortable or uncomfortable is, it depends on, okay, let me give you an example. I love snakes, okay? So when I see a snake, I'm happy. And sometimes, now not anymore, but in the past, usually I also wanted to touch it, okay? Another person with a very similar, you know, history as me could actually feel extremely uncomfortable about that snake and absolutely not want to touch it. This is why again, the world where I personally live, my storytelling make the snakes something cool. The storytelling of the other person close to me that see the same snakes makes the snake very dangerous and scary. So feeling comfortable or uncomfortable depend on the storytelling we create. So when we think, okay, we have to change the model, means that we are not going to have all the stuff that we have now, you know, all the cars and all the technology and cool houses, and we can change that stuff every 2 years, maybe not the house, let's say the car, I don't know. But, you know, this could make people feeling uncomfortable because they live inside a certain, you know, storytelling. but it could become actually extremely uncomfortable to do that. For example, and there's a lot of people already who feel that. I feel that, you know, having a big car to me makes me uncomfortable. If someone give me a big car as a present, I don't want it. I could take it and sell it, okay? But I don't want it. I don't want it because the way I'm coding the big car, you know, a big SUV, the way I'm coding that, make the big car something I don't like, because it makes me feeling uncomfortable in respect to the people I interact with, I live with, in respect of this value system I have. You know, because so being comfortable or uncomfortable is just a matter of deciding within which type of world you want to live. And the threshold are actually very distant usually. I mean, of course, could be objectively uncomfortable living in a very, very poor condition with no food, you know, feeling cold, having no shelter, that kind of stuff. But between where we are now, let's say we don't have to go back or to have less. We have to have different.
Okay.
And there's, I think, limitless arrangements of reality where we can live and feel comfortable. We have to change our storytelling.
You just nailed it.
I have a question. Why do people keep on doing the same thing over and over again, even though they know that it has a bad impact on our environment, or on us? For example, deforestation or polluting of the environment. Is it a matter of being ignorant or not having any alternatives? Because we have organizations that prioritize environmental education.
That's another interesting question. I think I didn't get well the first part. Can you repeat the first couple of sentences?
Oh, why do people keep on doing the same thing over and over again?
Okay. Yes. Okay. That's the big problem. But again, okay, we have different layers, and now things got more complicated in the last few decades, especially in the last 20 years, because there's goals, you know, and routes. The way to achieve those goals. And for example, now we can't really say that we assume that the politics that represent us in the different countries represent also our goals. And this is not always true. So we have, you know, kind of contrasting messages. And that's why, let's say, politics is more like religion than shopping. So we don't choose a politician because we really think he's going to do what actually is supposed to do. We choose a politician because it represents more our identity, our history, our dreams and stuff. And maybe he's going to implement something else because he has a completely different agenda. Meaning that even if we are well informed, the kind of messages that we receive are not actually helping us to take the right decision, because they are very competing, because there's competing agenda and competing interests. I go back to what I just said before. If we really want to get out of this mess, to this problem, we have to start thinking, and when I say we have to start thinking, I mean you, me, and you guys. I mean the people who want to change something, they have to start changing something by cooperating, not relying on, you know, on what is already there, society, politics, because we can't say that they have the same agenda that we would like. If we start doing this, we can create, you know, increase the critical mass of people trying to do the same thing. And when that critical mass will be enough, things will start slowly change. What is happening now, there's no critical mass, there's a lot of chatting, and there's competing interest and competing goals. And sometimes it's not even easy to understand why, you know, our representatives are saying certain things instead of others. Also because they have learned that we can be manipulated. So we have to start, you know, to be more critical thinker. We have to set our goals, and we have to use the tools that we have to reach those goals. And again, the solution is cooperation. Cooperation between you guys. Don't wait others to do it. Cooperation, peacefully, flexible cooperation. Peaceful, flexible cooperation.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Michele. I think while
We've
we
got
wait,
one more. I've actually got 3 students still. Is that all right? We'll make it short.
Hello, Doctor.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. The solution must come from us, but people seems like they don't care. They are not committed, and we keep on teaching. So what can we do to get people involved, and what can we do about the non-commitment, and why is this not included in the curriculum?
Our school curriculum is our CAPS curriculum does not incorporate the environmental issues in a certain way. And my student is a little bit worried if we don't start doing this properly, where will we end up? Because obviously it's a future generation that is going to be taken over, and they're going to have no idea of the impacts that they're having. Our school curriculum is not strong. Environmental issues have not been linked into our CAPS curriculum. Now that's the curriculum assessment policy statement. It was rewritten a few years back, and once again, in most learning areas, environmental issues have not been addressed. And of course, the teachers are not educated pertaining to environmental or linking environmental education into the school curriculum. And there's definitely, amongst our youth and our children, they definitely don't care. They're definitely not committed and concerned about what is going on in the environment. It's just there. And how, my students are a bit worried, that was the question. How are we going to change the commitment, change the level of being concerned, and to start caring?
Okay, that's a complex issue, but I think, let's say, education is part of what, you know, is part of the drivers that make us go in a way or another. For example, I think of course, is super important, and a good, you know, educational system is fundamental. But it's also true that, you know, a good teacher within a bad educational system is better than a bad teachers within a good educational system. So even there's layers. And if we think to environmental destruction, it has been mostly done by the most educated part of the world, which is the Western countries. You know, we can say that for quite a long time, we had, you know, a very good educational system, but we are the one that are actually, you know, destroying most of what is, you know, it has been destroyed in the last several decades. So I think it's fundamental to try to improve the educational system and change, you know, curricula, and improve the training of the teachers and include the right subjects. But I think that that the context in which first, there's a lot that we can do, you know, even out of school. It's a matter of value system. The reason why Western countries, despite being so well educated, as being so bad in respect of the environment is because of, and I'm simplifying, the value system. So also because, you know, education gives you a lot of information, good or, you know, or bad, but information themselves are not enough. We have to link those information to, you know, to the emotional world and to a value system that make you feel, that make you decide to do the right thing, also in respect of something you don't know in terms of, you know, information. So I think that we have to always try to get a better educational system, meaning, you know, interacting with politics, and when we go to the ballot is very important. But this doesn't mean that we cannot do anything else. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do as a community, and growing in a community with the right values is at least as important as a good education. Also, you know, relying on, of course, education is fundamental. I mean, no questions. But I think we should always try to move the attention from what others or the system can do for us to ourselves. What can we do for ourselves? That's the key.
Because this is thought-provoking. I think, like Marit, Johan, I think we were on the brink, so we didn't get that caught up in the social media. But if I look at my little cousins who are now in their 20s, I can see it's completely encompassed their lives.
And that's, you know, we have to say that social media, I mean, they are companies and they work in order to turn us into better consumers. I mean, they want us to, they won't make money through us. So we have to be aware of that and decide, is it really something that I want, or I use them, I mean, to facilitate my social interaction, and that's it. And but you know, and this is not something that you learn at school. It's something that you learn in your social context.
Or you learn at SSA today. On the 17th of
It's
May.
because your family and your friends' families and your, you know, inner community and larger community, they all think the same. So, and when the message is, you know, repeated and repeated and repeated, it works. And of course, and it's not really what is happening now, because marketing is very powerful. And they have learned that if they, you know, if they use short-term rewards, we are very weak on that side.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychology involved in it.
A lot.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question from the floor from Diboho Mawele, TUT. Good morning, Doctor. Thank you for the talk. It is said that passion is slowly depleting in the environmental profession, especially the up-and-coming professionals. There are a lot of qualified practitioners, but less passion. How can that be corrected?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure is necessarily true.
Yeah.
I think again it depends on variables. For example, maybe in proportion is true. In proportion means that now we are way more people than 20 years ago. I think the first time I thought about the world population when I was a kid, I think we were like 3.7 billion or 4 billion, something like that. And now we are twice that number. And maybe in proportion, it's true that maybe there's less people with passion, let's say, but I'm not sure. I think there's enough people with passion. But again, passion is like, or living things with passion is an outcome of the social context where you grow up. Again, if we I mean, you know, we create a context in which everyone lives something with passion, people who will grow into that context will learn that way to, you know, to interact with the world, you know, with the reality out there. Passion become the way. So of course, now that a lot of interaction are mediated by technology, you know, is not the same thing. It's a very complex question. And of course, I don't have a solution to correct this, but, or let's say the solution is always the same. We have to identify values, we have to identify goals, and we have to use the tools to achieve that, not to be used by the tools. And that's the way. Means that we have to build a stronger community where, you know, individuals can play, you know, a role in containing certain disturbances from outside, like, you know, and it's also a matter of decisions. I don't want to be, you know, used as a consumer and nothing else, you know, which is what, of course, I'm simplifying, but is the way things are actually going. That's the first step. If I don't do that, I mean, things slightly change. And then I decide another thing and things slightly change. And somehow this also triggers passion for the things that you really care about. Passion can be seen as a, you know, as a way, if what people really care about is, you know, things that have been brought by external entities into your life, that's very difficult, you know, it's difficult to have passion. But, you know, the direct experience and growing in a rich, you know, community where we can, you know, share passions, trigger passion in the youth. So I think the solutions are always kind of the same. We have to decide our journey. We have to decide what kind of journey I want to lead.
And I don't know if you agree with me, Dr. Michele, but like I spoke about your life story and you said you were born at the foot of the Eastern Alps in North Italy. So you had exposure to nature and it's not always everyone's cup of tea. So for example, in Cape Town, not anyone will hike, but they'll take the cable car up the mountain. Not everybody will, I don't know, kayak in the ocean, but they might go on a cruise. So I think it's also exposure. I don't know if that's agreed or not. It's exposure to the environment to be able to grow that passion.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. Okay.
Good morning.
I'm just here to say thank you to Dr. Menegon on behalf of the TUT family. This was an amazing talk to kickstart the series. I'm looking forward to the next talk by Dr. Govender. Dr. Ogilvie is always telling us that you have to be in conservation with head, hands, and heart. And this talk was a stamp to confirm with you. I mean, that what she says is true. So again, thank you very much. This was an amazing talk. Yeah.
Thank you very much to you.
Dr. Menegon, I always say that a presentation must start with a bang and end with a bang, and you did both very well. Thank you.
Thank you,
My
Chair.
students are amazing. I've got 108. They've given me a lot of gray hair, but one day we will see them making a difference. And I'm not willing to give up, just like you are not willing to give up. And thank you for giving us the time. And I know how precious your time is. And that's all what I can say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It has been an honor, really.
Definitely. Thank you, Dr. Cheryl and class. I'm just going to go to Mark now. And then we can close.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michele, for the talk, and also thank you for the questions. And I think one of the recurring themes we confront is how do we change the course, if you want, of history, because that is exactly what's supposed to be happening and what you talked about. And I do think that we can take quite a bit of hope from the fact that there have been many instances in the past where history has changed course, sometimes for the better and sometimes maybe not for the better, but it has changed, and there's really no reason to believe this time should be any different. Now, in the current context, one of the things, we take many things for granted. And I personally believe that questioning what we take for granted is a very good way to trigger conversations with people who might not be as well informed. And so one of the points I would make is we take for granted that nature, as long as it's alive, is worth nothing, zero. It has no value. A tree has no value. It only has value once we turn it into wood or a plank or a chair or something else. Or living animals have very little value. They have value once we put them on a grill. So the real question is, why is it that all those who destroy nature, basically kill nature, turn living nature into dead nature, never have to justify why nature is zero, while all those who are here on the call, who probably want to protect living nature, have to constantly justify why it should not be zero?
That's very interesting. Okay, you're right, of course, and I think it's also because the way we define value. You know, we are being immersed in a society where value is done in a certain is intended in a certain way. In fact, nature was an externality in economy, so we have to pay everything if we want to make a product, but nature. So, or when government give concessions for logging a forest, they don't calculate for the price of the concession the value of the tree. It's just an arbitrary, price that they give to the concessionaire. Oh, and of course, they don't think that those trees have value because they think the value of the tree when it's turned into planks, and on the ground of that, they kind of decide how much the logging concession is going to cost to the concessionaire. Okay, now things are changing a little bit, and I think the let's say carbon market has opened the dance, but now there's already biodiversity market coming in where we try to assign a value not only to living things but also to their relationship, and will be a challenge. But I think so things are changing. Of course, I would like to live in a situation in which we understand, for example, that living in a natural environment make my life better, and that has a value, even if it's difficult to be quantified in terms of money. But we know very well, and we have been knowing this since even before E.O. Wilson published Biophilia, the way we experience nature make our lives better. In fact, very rich people, there was an interesting study many years ago about that, they buy houses and cars and stuff in cities where they work, and then as soon as they go beyond a certain threshold of richness, they buy a house, in the middle of the wood or in the isolated highland with wonderful landscapes and animals and so on. So at some point, richness, money, allow you to buy what is really valuable for yourself, which is silence, a quiet place, a rich place, a nice place, a beautiful view, that kind of stuff. So I think I would say that we were just wrong, and we still are wrong in not doing that. But I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I hope I'm not wrong.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michele.
Thank you
That
to
was
you.
like mind-blowing.
Thank you.
It's given me enough to think about, for the rest of, until next week, Sunday, like you said.